Welcome back to another episode of After the License. Today, we're going to talk about the 3 reasons you should create a real estate podcast for your real estate business or for your real estate team. But first, again, if you're brand new here, make sure you're checking out not only our YouTube channel, because we have a ton of free goodies in the description, but make sure you're checking us out basically anywhere you get podcasts. We're talking about podcasts today. We're available basically anywhere you get podcasts. So make sure you're subscribed and leave us a review if you're listening, because that is always helpful. So podcasts are something that I've been doing for a really long time. I think the first podcast I created was 5, 6, 7 years ago. And the reality is creating a podcast back then was not that easy. But in 2021 and beyond, it's only gotten easier. And so the logistics around creating a podcast are so much simpler that, in my opinion, everyone could have a podcast. Now, there's a lot of thoughts around that, right? Kind of everyone having a podcast is a joke in today's age. But if you run a real estate business, I think there's 3 reasons why creating a real estate podcast can be really beneficial. We're going to touch on those now. And then I'm going to touch on at the very end how you might actually go and do that really simply with a couple of easy tools. So the first reason that you might create a podcast, or you should create a podcast, is it makes you look super official. So, I've got a couple different podcasts, one for my real estate team and one here for After the License. And as soon as this gets released to Apple Podcasts, my buddy texts me and says, "Holy smokes, I can't believe you're famous. You're on my iPhone in the podcast section." And the reality is when you show up there, even though it's very cheap, in a lot of cases sometimes kind of free, right? So I pay $10 a month for my podcast hosting service. It makes you look super official. The fact that you can show up in, Apple Podcasts or Spotify just makes and elevates your brand and your content to the next level. So that's reason number 1. If you're a real estate team or a real estate agent, just being able to say, "Hey, check out our podcast," elevates you in the mind of your consumer, in my opinion. Okay? The second reason that you should create a real estate related podcast is it's going to force you to create content. If you have a podcast, you're going to have to release content on that podcast. So you're going to have to start to think about, what can I talk about that's going to be interesting to my listener and my consumer? And once you start to produce that on a regular basis, even if it's just once a week, you can then take that content and you can repurpose it for a ton of other things. So again, for After the License, I shoot these videos and I release them on YouTube, and I put them on the podcast, and I put them on the Facebook page and Instagram. So I can repurpose all of this stuff just from one piece of content. And if you're in real estate, you can do the same thing. You can do one podcast episode and you can put it in your weekly newsletter. You can put it on your Facebook page. You can put it on your Instagram page. So one piece of content can then be repurposed and it ends up multiplying its effect. So forcing yourself to create content and doing something like video or audio, I think is really, really, really powerful stuff. The third reason, this is more of a technical reason, but podcasts are fantastic for SEO, so search engine optimization. I'm a huge SEO nerd, and one of the things you need for good SEO is you need sites that point back to your website. And a good podcast set up the right way can actually do that. So if you have a WordPress website, you can use what they call Blueberry. It's BLUBRRY to host your podcast on your WordPress site. And that gives your site some fantastic SEO juice, because it's basically broadcasting your podcast to the world. It's landing on things like Apple's website and some of these other podcast carriers, and it's getting linked back to your website, which, again, not to get too much into SEO, is powerful for SEO. So that is the third reason why I think having a podcast makes just a ton of sense in 2021 and beyond. Now, as I promised, I'm going to touch on 2 tools that you can use to start your podcast today pretty much instantaneously. The first one I use is StreamYard. So if you've listened to any of our kind of interview style podcast episodes, I use StreamYard for those. And what I really like about StreamYard is, yes, you can interview people, but you can actually record just yourself as well. Yes, you can stream to Facebook or YouTube, but there's, again, a record only option. And why StreamYard is really easy is you can record yourself, record only, and then you can download the video, yes, but you can actually download just the audio if you want to. So you can go and you can record a podcast episode just yourself using StreamYard. Again, there's a ton of other different tools that you can use as well, but just StreamYard, and download the audio really simply and upload it to a tool like Blueberry, which is podcast hosting, and create your podcast. The other tool I would recommend if you don't have your own WordPress site and you don't want to get into the technical side of that is you can create your own podcast really easy using a service called Libsyn, Libsyn. The most basic podcast hosting package is about $5 a month, I think. They help you syndicate it to everything out. You just need to basically post audio files, and again, StreamYard can help you do that, and your podcast will then be broadcast to the world. So hopefully this is helpful, whether you're a new agent and you're thinking about the different ways you can market yourself, market your business, market your real estate team, or maybe you're an experienced real estate team looking to kind of get an edge on your competition. Look at podcasting. It's the wave of the future, and there's so many intrinsic benefits to it. So I hope this was helpful. Drop a comment below. Do you want to start a podcast? What kind of name do you have for it? What would you talk about? And what else? What other benefits are there out there besides the three that I touched on? Okay, thanks everybody. I'll catch you next time.